I used to measure my weeks not in days, but in deadlines. At Luminara Logistics, time wasn't something you managed, it was something that managed you. My phone buzzed from dawn until past midnight, and the glow of my laptop became more familiar than my own kitchen. 70 hours, sometimes 75, blurred together in a rhythm that felt less like living and more like serving a sentence. Family dinners were the first thing to go. I told myself it was temporary, that when the promotion finally came, I'd have breathing room. That lie carried me through countless skipped birthdays, Sunday roasts, and long voicemails from my sister Iris, asking when I'd show up like I used to. The worst was Mom's birthday. Iris called twice that week to remind me, gentle but firm Clara, she misses you. Don't make another excuse. I promised I'd be there. I even wrapped a scarf I knew Mom would love. But on the day, Vivian dropped a last-minute urgent project on my desk. If you can nail this tonight, it'll show real leadership, she said, tapping the file like it was gold. So instead of lighting candles around my mother's cake, I sat in my office cubicle, the hum of the HVAC for company, combing through spreadsheets and piecing together charts Vivian would parade in the morning. I told myself she'd notice, she'd remember, she'd reward me. By the time I got home, it was close to midnight. Out of habit. I opened my phone, scrolling for distractions before collapsing into bed. That's when the photo appeared, Vivian, in a crimson dress, holding a champagne flute, laughing beside my cousin at Mom's birthday dinner. The caption read, "Such a wonderful night with friends and family." My throat went dry. I'd sacrificed my seat at the table for Vivian's project, and she'd been at the table all along, not working, not grinding, just smiling for photos, clinking glasses with the very people I'd promised to see. I stared at the image until my eyes burned. The scarf I'd wrapped for Mom sat unopened in the passenger seat of my car. In that moment, something in me cracked, something I didn't yet have words for, but it was the start of a fracture that would only deepen. The Monday after Mom's birthday dinner, I walked into the office with a pit in my stomach. It was review week. The moment I'd been telling myself would make every sacrifice worth it. Vivian's assistant had blocked off half an hour on my calendar, and I tried to steady my breathing as I walked toward her glass office. Vivian didn't even glance up when I stepped inside. She was typing briskly, nails clicking against the keyboard, then finally gestured to the chair opposite her. I sat down, notebook in hand, rehearsing in my head the polite smile I'd wear when she finally said the words, promotion, leadership, new title. She folded her hands and looked at me like a doctor about to deliver results. "Clara, no one here doubts your commitment. Your work ethic is obvious." My heart leapt. Then came the knife. But at this stage, what you still need to develop is executive presence, strategic pacing. You're burning yourself out. That's not sustainable leadership. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. I've been leading 3 accounts for months. My team's hit every target. Vivian smiled, a tight, practiced curve. You are on track, but not quite there yet. Let's revisit after the next cycle. Next year, the words landed like ice water. I nodded slowly, masking the sting, scribbling nonsense in my notebook just to keep my hands busy. By the end of the week, I watched as 2 colleagues, both newer than me, announced their promotions on LinkedIn. Confetti emojis poured into the comments, and the company Slack buzzed with congratulations. I sat frozen at my desk, scrolling through their celebratory posts, my own screen filled with overdue reports I'd carried alone. That night, Iris texted me, "How did your review go?" I stared at the message, thumb hovering, then typed, "Good. Just need to keep proving myself." It was the first time I realized I was lying to cover the truth, not from Vivian, but from myself. And once I saw that lie, I couldn't unsee it. The weeks after review season felt like running on fumes. I kept my head down, chasing deadlines that never seemed to end, clinging to the idea that maybe, just maybe, Vivian would change her tune if I kept proving myself. One client meeting after another became a pattern. I'd spend days preparing decks, troubleshooting last-minute crises, and fielding endless calls. By the time we sat across from executives in conference rooms, Vivian would glide in with perfect hair, skim the first slide, and let me carry the technical details. When the tough questions came, I was the one answering, improvising, reassuring. She'd wait until the close, stand up with her polished smile, and say, "We're proud of the work our team has done." Then she'd collect the handshakes. The same story repeated with internal reports. I poured weeks into a detailed process overhaul, writing every line of the recommendations. When the PDF circulated, the cover page read, "Prepared by Vivian Ross." My name wasn't even in the appendix. I told myself it didn't matter, that people who mattered knew the truth. But one night, as I scrolled through my inbox before bed, a company-wide email stopped me cold. "Congratulations to the leadership team for the flawless launch of the Redwood Initiative. Your vision continues to inspire us all." The Redwood Initiative had been mine my late nights, my weekends, my endless revisions. I had fought through every setback, from supply delays to last-minute vendor changes. Yet there it was, credited to the leadership team, which meant Vivian. My name was nowhere. I read the message 3 times, my phone's blue glow the only light in the room. The silence pressed against my chest, heavier than exhaustion. It wasn't just that I was invisible, it was that my invisibility was useful to her. I dropped the phone on the nightstand and lay staring at the ceiling, the words looping in my head until they felt like a verdict. By morning, I knew something had shifted. I couldn't keep pretending her promises were worth the pieces of myself I kept giving away. I had just finished polishing a 200-slide deck when the email came through. My eyes were burning from staring at charts too long, so at first I didn't catch it. The subject line was bland quarterly strategy notes, but my name wasn't anywhere in the thread. Still, I'd been CC'd accidentally. I opened it and felt my stomach twist. Vivian had forwarded the report I'd spent the last 3 weeks building every number, every insight, every graphic to the CEO. Her note was brief. "Here's my updated analysis. Looking forward to discussing at tomorrow's session." My hands shook on the keyboard. My updated analysis, not even a mention of me, not even a hint that I existed. I scrolled down, checking if she'd kept the file name. She had changed it, renamed the document with her initials. I sat frozen, the office noise muffled, as if the air had thickened. I thought about every night I had stayed late, every meal I had skipped, believing I was building towards something. Seeing her words in black and white felt like watching a door slam shut. That night, Iris insisted we meet for dinner at a small diner near her apartment. I slid into the booth, still buzzing from the discovery, and before I could stop myself, the words spilled out. "I don't think she ever planned to promote me," I said, my voice lower than I intended. "I think. She's just been using me to cover her own work." Iris didn't blink. She stirred her tea once, then set the spoon down with a clink. "Clara, that's obvious. The real question is, why are you still killing yourself for her?" Her bluntness stung, but it lodged somewhere deeper than denial. For the first time, I couldn't find an answer. I sat there in silence, staring at the condensation running down my water glass, realizing Iris had just said out loud what I'd been too afraid to admit. It was almost 7 in the evening, and most of the floor had emptied. My screen glowed with unfinished tasks when Vivian appeared in the doorway of my cubicle, a folder tucked under her arm and that smile she wore when she was about to hand me more than I could carry. "Clara, I need you to pull together a full slide deck for tomorrow's leadership sync," she said briskly. "Something polished figures, visuals, speaker notes. Shouldn't take long since you already know the material." I glanced at the clock. Tomorrow's sync was at 9 a.m., less than 14 hours away. My chest tightened with the familiar instinct to nod, to say yes, to push everything else aside and rescue her again. But Iris's voice from the diner echoed in my head. "Why are you still killing yourself for her for the first time?" I didn't swallow the instinct. I straightened, my palms damp against the desk. "No," I said quietly. "I'll handle it during work hours tomorrow, but I'm not staying late tonight." Vivian blinked, as if she hadn't heard me right. Then her smile thinned. "Clara, this is important. You don't want to look unprepared in front of the executives." I met her eyes, pulse hammering. "I'm not unprepared. I've been doing the work all year, but I'm not pulling another all-nighter so you can walk in with fresh slides." For a long second, the mask cracked, her jaw tightened. Her eyes sharpened, but then she forced a shrug. Like it didn't matter. "Fine. Tomorrow." Then, I packed up my bag with shaky hands, barely able to breathe until I stepped outside into the cool night air. My legs trembled all the way to the train. But inside me, something fierce had sparked. The word no echoed in my chest like a heartbeat, raw and defiant. For the first time in months, I felt the faintest taste of freedom. And once I'd spoken it aloud, I knew it couldn't be the last. After that night, something shifted in me. Saying no once made me wonder what else I had the power to change. I still showed up, still delivered. But behind the scenes, I started a new project, one that wasn't on Luminara's books. Every evening, after closing out my official tasks, I opened a private drive and began collecting emails where I solved issues Vivian later claimed credit for, project logs showing my hours stacked like bricks while hers barely appeared, client feedback addressed to me that magically turned into team accomplishments and reports. I labeled, time-stamped, and sorted everything until the folder grew fat with evidence. It felt secretive, almost dangerous, but also clarifying. Each screenshot was a mirror reflecting what I had really done. Each PDF was a reminder that I wasn't imagining things. The moment that sealed it came during a call with Victor Lin, one of our most demanding clients. We had just wrapped a critical rollout, and he said warmly, "Clara, I want to thank you personally. If you hadn't stepped in last weekend, I don't think we would have hit the deadline." Before I could respond, Vivian's voice cut in. "Our team is grateful for your partnership, Victor. Delivering results is always a group effort." He hesitated, then moved on, but I felt my name vanish in real time, erased as smoothly as she closed a tab. I smiled tightly into the camera, but inside I was boiling. Later that evening, I wrote it all down in my running log. The date, the words, the way she redirected credit. I copied the recording link into my folder. As I closed the file, I realized I wasn't just keeping notes anymore. I was building armor layer by layer, proof by proof, and soon, I knew, I'd have to decide how to use it. The message came out of nowhere. My inbox pinged with a name I hadn't thought about in months, Marjorie Lane. We'd met briefly at a logistics summit the previous year, exchanged cards, and promised to stay in touch, the kind of empty phrase that usually went nowhere. Her note was short, but precise. "Clara, a director role just opened at Helios Freight Solutions." Your name came to mind immediately. "Would you be open to a conversation?" I stared at the words, torn. Loyalty had kept me shackled to Luminara far longer than common sense. But my folder of evidence sat waiting on my desktop like a shadow, reminding me what loyalty had cost. After a deep breath, I typed back, "Yes, I'm open to a conversation." The interview happened over video later that week. Marjorie greeted me warmly, then introduced the panel to executives, both direct and attentive. Unlike Vivian, they actually listened when I spoke. They asked about process redesigns, complex accounts, and crisis management. I laid out examples of projects I had carried on my back, careful not to let bitterness color my words. When I finished explaining how I salvaged a multi-million-dollar client after a vendor collapse, one of the executives leaned forward and said, "Your resume is impressive, Clara, but your leadership results, they're outstanding. You've been doing director-level work for a long time." The words hit harder than I expected. I felt heat rise in my chest, not from embarrassment, but from recognition. For the first time, Someone wasn't minimizing what I'd done or burying it under vague encouragement. They saw me clearly. By the end of the call, Marjorie outlined the offer: higher salary, full benefits, equity, and a defined path to VP within 2 years. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, the city lights flickering against my window. I knew what this was. It wasn't just an opportunity, it was a door swinging wide open, and the only question left was whether I had the courage to walk through it. I carried the folder under my arm like it weighed more than stone. The word documentation was scrawled across the cover in thick black marker, each letter pressed so hard it almost cut the cardboard. I didn't rehearse what I would say. I just walked straight into HR, asked if Harold Klein had a minute, and closed the door behind me. He looked up over his glasses, brow furrowed. "Clara, this is unexpected." I placed the folder on his desk and slid it toward him. "My resignation. Effective in 2 weeks, and everything you'll need to understand why." Harold opened it slowly. Inside were pages of emails, project logs, timelines, and client notes, each one a brick in the wall I had been building. "This is detailed," he said, flipping through. "But you know how these things go. Investigations take time. You may not see the outcome." I shook my head. "I'm not here for an outcome. I'm not here to burn bridges, either. I just want the truth on record, so it can't be buried with me." For a long moment, he studied me, then nodded. "I'll log it officially." When I left his office, my hands trembled, but it wasn't from fear. It was release. That afternoon, I drafted a resignation letter so short it almost startled me. "Please accept my notice of resignation, effective 2 weeks from today." I printed it, signed my name, and walked to Vivian's office. She was sipping coffee, scrolling her screen. Without a word, I set the envelope on her desk. She looked up, first puzzled, then wary. "What's this, my notice?" I said evenly. "HR has the full version." Her fingers tightened around the cup. For once, she had no ready smile, no polished script. Just silence as I turned and walked away. The door clicking softly behind me. 2 days after handing in my notice, my calendar pinged with a meeting request from the top floor. Damian Caldwell, the CEO himself, wanted to see me. My stomach tightened, but I went. His office was everything mine wasn't: broad windows, polished wood, and the quiet hum of power. He stood when I walked in, all charm. "Clara," I just heard. "I can't let someone like you walk out without a conversation." I stayed standing until he gestured me into a chair. He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Look, we can match the director title. Salary adjustment, equity, a clearer structure for your growth. No more ambiguity. You've earned it." For a second, the words almost hooked me. They were everything I'd asked for. But the timing cut deeper than the offer soothed. I steadied my voice. "Why now? Damian. Why only after I quit? Where was all this when I was doing the work without the title?" He blinked, caught off guard, then recovered with a diplomatic smile. "Sometimes we need a wake-up call to realize what we have." I stood, heart steady. I already woke up. "I'm not staying." The silence after that was heavy. He sighed, nodded once, and let me go. Days later, the fallout began. An email surfaced from Novete, one of our largest clients. It was addressed to Damian, CCing Vivian and half the leadership team. "We hope Clara remains our point of contact. Her leadership has been vital to our success with Luminara." I read the copy in stunned silence at my desk. Within minutes, Vivian replied with her usual polish. "Our team prides itself on seamless transitions. You'll continue to receive excellent service." But the cracks were showing. Slack threads hummed with questions, hallways buzzed with whispers. For the first time, I saw it in their eyes, the realization that I wasn't just another employee. I was the glue holding more together than they'd admitted. And now that glue was pulling away, one layer at a time. As I prepared for the life waiting beyond their walls, my first week at Helios felt like stepping out of a storm into sunlight. People greeted me like a colleague, not a workhorse. Meetings started on time and ended on time. When the clock hit 5, the office actually emptied. No one praised burnout as dedication. It was strange at first, almost suspicious. But by the second Friday, I realized it was real. I went to my niece's soccer game that weekend, the first I'd attended in years. The bleachers were hard, the field muddy, and I couldn't stop smiling. Iris nudged me, whispering, "Welcome back to the land of the living." And for once, I believed her. At Helios, I didn't have to fight for visibility. My ideas were heard. My name was on the projects I led. And when I worked late, it was by choice, not coercion. I began sleeping through the night again, waking without dread. Piece by piece, I was reclaiming parts of myself I'd forgotten I'd lost. Months later, Helios secured a massive logistics contract that had been Luminara's prize for years. I sat at the signing table, pen in hand, surrounded by colleagues who treated me like I belonged there. When I glanced up, I saw her, Vivian, seated in the audience, stiff in her chair, lips pressed tight. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the weight of the room had shifted and she was no longer holding it. Our eyes met for a brief second. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply offered a faint smile, then turned back to the contract and signed my name. In that moment, I understood what promotion truly meant. Not the title, not the salary. It was breathing freely, eating dinner with my family, leading without fear of being erased. They thought I was replaceable, but the one thing they never saw coming was that I'd already chosen myself.